the traditional notion of psychoanalysis is that because of some inner obstacles, you internalized, identified excessively with paternal or other social prohibitions, you cannot set yourself free to enjoy. Pleasure is not accessible for you. It is accessible to you only in pathological forms of feeling guilty and so on. So then the idea is psychoanalysis allows you to suspend, overcome these internalized prohibitions so that it enables you to enjoy. The problem today is that the commandment of the ruling ideology is enjoy in different ways. It can be sexual enjoyment, consumption, commodity enjoyment, up to spiritual enjoyment, realize yourself, whatever. And I think that the problem today is not how to get rid of your inhibitions and to be able to spontaneously enjoy. The problem is how to get rid of this injunction to enjoy.
Hey everyone, today I'm going to try to understand what Slavoj Z means by enjoy a superego. Or another way of putting it is that the moral injunction of today is to enjoy. We are forced to enjoy, as he would put it. Now, of course, in Freudian psychoanalysis, if you just Google the word superego, generally what you would get is something like the superego is sort of a higher calling, something that is telling us what's right from wrong, giving us moral injunctions, moral imperatives. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't murder. It could be in the form of God or in the form of the state, in the form of science, something that is in some sense calling to our higher angels, so to speak. But that's a very, I would say, adulterated way of putting it because it's a bit more complicated. But for Zizek, superego, he views it essentially from a Lacanian lens. So Jacques Lacan is obviously a French psychoanalyst that Zizek theorizes on and perhaps is, outside of Hegel, Zizek's biggest influence. And the best way to understand it is that I'm going to read out an excerpt from his text, How to Read Lacan, which, if you're interested in Lacanian psychoanalysis, probably is the best text to get into. I myself have learned so much from this, given the fact that Lacan is infamously very, very dense and difficult to understand. So, in How to Read Lacan, in page 79, here's what Zizek says apropos superego. Nothing forces anyone to enjoy except the superego. The superego is the imperative of jouissance. Jouissance is, in fact, a French term which directly translated means pleasure in English. However, most translators of Lacan have decided to not translate it and leave it in the native French because the way Lacan uses jouissance is it's not merely pleasure. In fact, the simplest way to put it is that in the Lacanian sense of jouissance, there's a pleasure that we get from pain. I'll leave it right there. So think of someone who does something like intermittent fasting or things like delayed gratification or all these self-help fanatics that get obsessed with cold showers or CrossFit or some stupid thing like that. And you think that you're putting yourself through difficult situations, through suffering, to sound like David Goggins. But in fact, Lacan, he says that, from his psychoanalytical lens, the pain you put through gives you jouissance. So the pain creates pleasure. Anyway, I'm not going to get too carried away with that. If you want to learn more about jouissance, again, read this book and just keep reading more Lacan and Zizek. Back to the book. Although jouissance can be translated as enjoyment, translators of Lacan often leave it in French in order to render palpable its excessive, properly traumatic character. We are not dealing with simple pleasures, but with a violent intrusion that brings more pain than pleasure. This is how we usually perceive the Freudian superego, the cruel and sadistic ethical agency that bombards us with impossible demands and then gleefully observes our failure to meet them. No wonder then that Lacan posited an equation between jouissance and superego. To enjoy is not a matter of following one's spontaneous tendencies. It is rather something we do as a kind of weird, twisted ethical duty. So the latter part is kind of the point Zizek makes where we can't, despite us being free, we can't just enjoy. It always comes with an obstruction initially, but also it always comes with a kind of a demand to enjoy. In our case, in the form of consumerism or in the form of, as I said, self-help fanatics who constantly talk about well-being and, I don't know, reading self-help books, something stupid like that. Apologies for the self-help people that I am critical of. I'm just thinking out loud here. In any case, before I get to my take on what Zizek means by enjoy superego, another text that I want to read off is yet another one of his great ones. For they know not what they do, enjoyment as a political factor. And in this book, in page 9, Zizek talks about this idea of prohibition and how, in fact, for us to enjoy, we need prohibition. So he goes like this. How do we account for this paradox that the absence of law universalizes prohibition? There's only one possible explanation. Enjoyment itself, which we experience as a transgression, is in its innermost status something imposed, ordered. What we enjoy, we never do it spontaneously. We always follow a certain injunction. The psychoanalytical name for this obscene injunction, for this obscene call, enjoy, is superego. And that's where he says enjoy is superego in our postmodern times. Now, before I get to my take, another good way to understand this point between what we think as being freely enjoying in life and then how we aren't as free as we think is using one of Zizek's great jokes of the traditional primitive father who gives direct, explicit demands versus the postmodern father who kind of wants you to, still gives you demands and directives, but kind of gives it in a way where it makes you think that you're freely acting despite not truly being free.
Let's say you have a good old-fashioned father. It's Sunday afternoon, you have to visit grandma. The father, good old-fashioned authoritarian father, will tell you, listen, I don't care how you feel if you're a small kid, of course. I don't care how you feel. You have to go.
You're going.
Going grandmother and behave there properly.
Okay.
That's good. You can resist. No, nothing is broken. But let's say you have this so-called tolerant postmodern father. What he will tell you is the following. You know how much your grandmother loves you. But nonetheless, you should only visit her if you really want to. Now, every child who is not an idiot, and they are not idiots, know that this apparent free choice secretly contains an even much stronger order. It's not only you have to visit your grandmother, but you have to like it. So
I'm beginning to like this book all the more.
That's one example of how apparent tolerance, choice, and so on can conceal a much stronger order.
So we should go back to more like the dad that just says, because I said so.
Absolutely. It's more honest.
Okay, so given that I'm a neophyte and certainly not an expert in psychoanalysis, here's my reading of what Zizek means by enjoy is superego. It seems that the superego, as I read before from How to Read Lacan's book, the imperatives that the superego gives us, we can never meet them. Therefore, we're always going to feel guilty for not meeting them. So in the past, it could be religious imperatives. Don't think of lustful thoughts, or no sex before marriage, or generally things imposed by the church, in the West at least. But obviously now, God is dead. No one really truly believes in God. Even people that do believe in God kind of believes in a very tepid, vanilla version of God. So this God that Lacan would call the big other doesn't exist anymore. So of course, this doesn't mean in the typical Richard Dawkins new atheist way, now we're free and we're free to choose, we're going to be these enlightenment beings. Certainly not. Simply, another universal takes its place. In this case, I would say it is the ideology of neoliberal capitalism and what our consumerist culture feeds us. So think about it. Terms like FOMO, fear of missing out. In fact, FOMO isn't just a mere feeling of, I should have done that, I should have gone there, I should have traveled, I should have bought that thing, or I should have had this experience of enjoyment. No, it's not just that. It's in fact a superego imperative. To enjoy has a moral weight to it. We bestow it metaphysical properties. In our times, not living your best life, not being fulfilled, is in fact almost a transgression against God himself, the God of our times. So God never has left. It's just been replaced by a new God, the capitalistic God, the neoliberal God, whatever you may call it. So the current hegemonical ideology tells us you have to enjoy infinitely, and keep in mind, as we read in this book, you can never meet the demands of the superego, so you can never enjoy enough. It's virtually impossible to have this kind of excessive enjoyment, and in fact, that's why it is a superego imperative, because you will always fail at it. So it really doesn't matter how much of pleasure you have, how much of drugs you do, how much of sex you have. At the end of the day, you will never meet this imperative of enjoyment. Now, the other side of the same coin is, of course, our obsession with self-help and this kind of fanatical, narcissistic addiction almost to constantly reading self-help books that pretty much tell the same message, just recycle the same banal message and put it in a different way, or going on these self-help retreats, or like the recent Gwyneth Paltrow podcast interview, following these really extreme radical diets, because it seems that kind of enjoyment is still a kind of I wouldn't really call it enjoyment in the way we would colloquially use that term. Rather, it's a kind of a self-service, and we're commanded by the superego to do that. You have to take care of yourself. If you aren't being healthy, if you aren't consuming productivity, business, self-help podcasts all the time, if you aren't doing something with your time that'll make your life meaningful and fulfilled, you're doing something wrong. This again is the same side of the same coin. Same side of the same coin. The other side of the same coin that still tells you to enjoy. It's no different to the kind of the imperative what we're seeing here in the self-help world is no different to the imperative we see from, let's say, Apple. Let's say is keep buying the new smartphone, keep falling into the consumerist machine, because there's always a better smartphone, there's always a better car, there's always a bigger house. It infinitely never ends, and all we are in the capitalist machine are just agents involved in it, where we aren't subjects, so to speak. The point being, sorry, I know I'm kind of all over the place and being quite loquacious. It's just this is a hard concept to articulate, but also Lacanian psychoanalysis is infamously dense and hard to understand. The point being that the superego commandment to enjoy, it's not merely this kind of hedonistic, materialistic kind of enjoyment where it's just sex, drugs, and kind of the rock and roll lifestyle. It's not just that, it's also the other side of the same coin where it's fanatical productivity, this feeling of guilt when you don't read a self-help book, when you kind of don't have any time to relax, you have to constantly be doing something, and of course the obsession with taking care of your health, listening to David Goggins yelling at you, or Andrew Huberman telling how to optimize your life, or doing, I don't know, cold showers or whatnot that everyone does. And by the way, I do all these things. So I'm not trying to moralize on any of these things. I'm simply saying where our drives to do these things come from. This is not a prescriptive video. But if you can understand this, psychoanalytically speaking, our modern God is in fact the God that tells us to be self-obsessed. But if you can also see how our self-obsession has to always serve the hegemonic ideology. In our times, it is free market capitalism, consumerism, whatnot, yada yada. And so the question, of course, is what's the solution? Are we stuck in this deadlock where we are constantly going to feel guilty for not enjoying? Unfortunately, yes. This is not a video that's supposed to be hopeful. Look, existence kind of sucks. So the point being that the superego wouldn't really go anywhere. However, and this is not something Lacan or Zizek or any of them really talk about too much, because they aren't prescriptive thinkers who tell you how to live your life the way Jordan Peterson does, let's say, for instance. They're philosophers. All they do is think and criticize and be critical of society and theorize on society and our contemporary times, which is what the role of a philosopher should be. I would say there are two ways to kind of deal with this. The first thing is to say, I would prefer not to. This probably manifests best in asexuality. If you look at, I've got some friends who are asexual, as in they've decided that they don't want to engage in the act, in the pleasurable act of sex, because it seems like we're constantly told to always do something. Just do it, as Nike says. Always engage with the world. Partake in the mechanisms of capitalism. Go and spend your money. Spend your money on drugs, hookers, whatever. Have a lot of sex. Don't miss out on any quote-unquote moral transgressions. But asexuality is in fact a radical act where you say, no, I would prefer not to. I'm not going to partake in what you're telling me to do. I'm not going to even partake in the enjoyment. I'm just going to be or do some other stupid thing that most of us humans do. That is one solution. That is sometimes something that I do too. But the other solution, I think, and again, this isn't just completely my opinion. I'm not saying this is what is the ultimate panacea to all of this. There really isn't an ultimate panacea. That's the point. Is in fact to deeply fall in love. What I mean by that is not just romantically falling in love, but rather it's very common in our society. Again, because of our overarching ideologies of our times, to not let things like love, being deeply attached or fixated on anyone, to get in the way. Rather focus on your career, focus on being productive, focus on yourself, as I've said many times. But love is a paradox, because love is the ultimate existential subversion, where you say, actually, no, I don't care about any of that. At this moment, I deeply care about this person. Love is a negation, a giant fuck you to the rest of society, and there's something beautiful in that, despite all the violent, dirty sides of love too. Which, for a bit of a shout out here, or a bit of a plug, sorry, I recently released an article called "Why Love Matters." Links below in the description if you want to take a look at it. The point being, attach yourself more to this world, but not in the sense of commodities or the capitalist system, but rather to other people, to your family, to your community, and of course to your romantic lover, and attach yourself all the way to the end. So it's not this kind of safe love where you play the Tinder game or the dating apps game where you try to look for the characteristics that tick the boxes. No, it's a kind of love where I choose this person and this person is absolute, as Zizek would say.
Contrary to what people mean, love does not idealize the other. The miracle is that you say, okay, you may be this person who is slightly stupid, not a perfect body, whatever, but still you are absolute for me. And true love precisely does not have to idealize. True love is not either eternal beauty or vulgar everyday person. True love is, you see eternal beauty in the everyday person.
In any case, whatever you may choose to do, keep in mind though that there really isn't an ultimate solution to any of this. Perhaps what's important is, once you're aware of this, then whenever you feel this superego imperative, even though I don't know if it's something you particularly feel in the sense of feeling an emotion, and that is, it's a bit more complicated, but at least once you're aware of it, you can be critical of it and still be within the system, yet criticize it. And when I mean system, I'm talking about the socio-symbolic order that we exist in. Okay, I hope I didn't butcher that. But of course, if I've made any mistakes in explaining any of the Lacanian concepts or the Zizekian concepts, please do point them out. As I said, I'm a neophyte, and really, I don't really know what I'm talking about here. So, hope you found that video useful. And if it's even possible, try and enjoy less, despite your superego constantly berating you with it.